Son las 11 horas de Santiago de Chile. Jennifer, ¿estamos todos listos con el streaming por YouTube?
Dame un segundo, hay un pequeño problema, es que aparezco yo en la pantalla y debería aparecer el señor Tomás.
Las 11
Ahora sí.
horas de Santiago de Chile. Perfecto, súper. Gracias, Jennifer. Entonces, yo creo que podemos empezar. Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes. Good morning, good afternoon. Hoy vamos a escuchar a Thomas Kaarsted, Deputy Library Director at the University of Southern Denmark y director del University Citizen Science Knowledge Center. Thomas va a hablar sobre Citizen Science, an opportunity for libraries and societal actors. Es el webinar de este mes de la Biblioteca de la CEPAL. Como ustedes saben, el formato es siempre lo mismo, entonces vamos a tener una presentación de media hora de parte de Thomas, y luego habrá un espacio para sus preguntas y comentarios, que por favor los comparten a través del chat, y ahí mis colegas Lynn y Claudia me van a ayudar a organizar sus preguntas y asegurar que demos seguimiento a sus preguntas y comentarios en la segunda parte de este webinar. So basically the format of this webinar is a half an hour presentation by Thomas, and then a half an hour with questions and comments from the audience, which I invite people to share through the chat, so that my colleagues, Claudia and Lynn, can organize those questions and make sure that we can answer as many questions as possible and address as many comments as possible. So, Thomas, welcome to this webinar. Thomas is the Deputy Library Director at the University of Southern Denmark and Director of the University Citizen Science Knowledge Center in the library. He has worked with citizen science since 2017, has been a project manager for a range of citizen science projects, and is the co-chair of the LIBER Citizen Science Working Group. LIBER is the Association of European Research Libraries. Thomas, welcome, and the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Wouter. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. It's a fantastic opportunity to share our ideas and pick up knowledge on citizen science from you, so thank you for that. Could I kindly ask someone, for example, Wouter, whether you can see my slides?
Yeah, I can see your slides, and now they're also in full screen, so I think we can start.
Fantastic. Building on the 6-7 years within citizen science in my library, I truly believe that citizen science is an opportunity not only for libraries, but most certainly also for universities and other societal actors. It talks very much into this open science agenda that, at least in Europe, has had some traction. So the next 30 minutes or so, I will try to dig into that and start very broad, but get into a very concrete library setting at the end. But a little bit about myself. As Wouter mentioned, I'm a Deputy Library Director at the SDU Library. So that is my one job, or real job. In reality, I spend almost every single hour being the daily manager or director of SDU Citizen Science Knowledge Center. And I will get into that. It's based in the library at SDU, which is a mid-sized Danish university, 4,000 researchers, 25,000 students. But it's not owned by the library per se, which is a very important message to convey. Also, I have done quite a bit of work in LIBER, as Wouter mentioned. And I am glad to announce that Dr. Paul Aries from UCL Libraries is present in the webinar. Paul and I and Tiberius Ignat has worked for the last 5 years on spreading citizen science across European libraries. And at one point, I might hand over to Paul for supplement comments or maybe a point or two there. So also, hello, Paul. Nice to have you on board. Today's program, very, very briefly, first 2 points, which is why would this be interesting? What are we dealing with? Setting the scene a little bit, because it is important that in Europe a new policy governance agenda has emerged, which has sort of transformed the game of open science and citizen science. Of course, what is it, and how could we as libraries dig into that? And again, if you have any questions, comments, jump in, put it in the chat. We have half an hour or so in the end, and I'm more than happy also to hear your experiences, concerns, questions, and whatnot. So that as an introduction, global wicked problems, or you could ask at this point in time, where did we go wrong? First of all, a wicked problem is a difficult or impossible problem to solve because it's incomplete, it's contradictory, it requires many actors, and most of these problems cannot be fixed. What do we mean in a global setting? Well, we have climate change and drought, and we have El Nino, we have all kinds of weather systems that are changing. We have ice that are melting at the ice caps. At my own university, a big strategic effort has been done with that. So we have made a SDU climate cluster, which addresses transdisciplinary research, including citizen science in this. So, of course, I think everybody could agree that that probably affects most of us. And again, we cannot solve it in Denmark, you cannot solve it in Argentina, you cannot solve it, maybe you can in the US alone, but again, it's a global wicked problem that requires the input of maybe the global community. You could also say that post-factual society of fake news is a global wicked problem, because if science is not respected, if knowledge is exchanged with opinions, then we don't really have a solid foundation to work with these problems. So that might also be a wicked problem that might need to be addressed. And again, citizen science is not the only answer to that, but if you engage in science as a citizen, as a participant, there are studies that show that you are much more like-minded to accept science as a tool or a fact or a solution than is not. This is one of my favorites. This is Mad Mike Hughes, who for many years spent all of his fortune building rockets so he could go up into the atmosphere and take photos and prove that the Earth is flat. He was the figurehead of the Flat Earthers, which is a quite big community. And just as many people don't believe that citizens of the Earth have been on the moon, quite an astounding number do believe that the Earth is flat. Unfortunately, to my big worry, Mad Mike Hughes killed himself in a rocket launch a few years back. So I think this movement might have to find a new figurehead. But also migration, poverty. In Europe, there's a lot of talk and definition with the global South. And I think in Europe, there is what is being called a migrant crisis that the European Union is trying to address. So there are all kinds of wicked problems that are not solved by one individual, by one scientist, by one nation, but requires what you could posture would be the power of many. And again, citizen science is one possible solution. Of course, there are much more other solutions available or to be discussed. But again, that's one of the reasons in Europe, at least also within the UN, that a movement within open science, citizen science, have begun. So briefly, because this is a thing that is happening out there, both on a governance level, on a level of science and based with scientists and universities, but also within people who are attending or participating in science. This is not an abstract thing. It's happening right now in various ways, but it begins typically with some sort of direction, policy, and partners. So what is really going on out there? And you could start with a UNESCO recommendation for open science that has, for the last few years, accepted that participatory science can contribute to democratization and can address inequities or enclosures of wealth, knowledge, and power towards solving problems of social importance. So again, UN, of course, which you in this circle would know, massive global player who have adopted open science and citizen science. And if you dig a little bit further into it, there are all kinds of participatory requirements. And what is really important is that the value and collaborative effort from societal actors beyond traditional scope, through, for example, citizen science, crowdsource-based scientific problems, participatory science, is actively recommended and promoted not only by the UN or UNESCO in this case, but also, for example, by the European Union, who are pouring millions, if not billions of euros into this. It's also to say that the European Union have launched and are launching massive citizen science activities. So, for example, if you apply for EU funding through the Horizon framework, chances are, if you are not actively pursuing citizen science, there are certain questions in the application that you need to address. For example, some sort of collective data, collective knowledge, collaborative science or research, or some sort of community-based engagement. So in Europe, at least, and maybe globally, this is not an abstract thing that can be put into application. I'll get into that. It comes with a terminology, with fact-based science, with recommendations, theories, and so forth. But again, setting the scene, patting ourselves on the shoulder in LIBER, we have had the Citizen Science Working Group, not least the effort by Dr. Paul Aries, who is present, that for the last 3.5 years have been promoting citizen science. We are currently 34 members from 30 libraries and work in different settings on promoting guides, the bespoke model invented by Paul and Dr. Tiberius Ignat, to be presented a little bit later. So also within libraries in a pan-European setting, several EU projects, but also a community of like-minded libraries who work with and promote the course, building, of course, with LIBER Open Science Roadmap and new LIBER strategy that for the last 4 or 5 years actively have been promoting and supporting citizen science and open science. So again, just where are we coming from with this? We are not even begun to get into what is citizen science. So the next few minutes, a little bit from the top down, but very, very important. What are we talking about? Citizen science is not an abstract thing, but building on Bruno Strasser, professor from Switzerland. I picked this up at the European Citizen Science Conference in Zurich a few years back, Geneva a few years back. If you look at what is going on, where does science come from, what does it manifest, and who is participating? Well, at least originally, science came with a heavy dose of experimentation. Building from the hard sciences, it branched out to all kinds of other disciplines and had late 1850s to 1900, a very, very big experimentation phase. Then also building in Germany and other countries, science consolidated itself and became more professionalized. And mid last century, during Second World War, science had never been distributed to so few people, because a lot of scientists were enrolled in war efforts and whatnot. But again, after Second World War, with a democratization policy from maybe globally, a welfare state, we are getting a richer society. And again, with the internet, and well, within, I think, the last 10 years, chances are that most of the global population has an iPhone or a smartphone or a computer or internet access. There has never been so many people globally who are participating actively live in science as we speak right now. It's estimated that there are currently between 3,000 and 5,000 live citizen science projects going on right now, with somewhere between 4 and 5 million participants, meaning that if we ditch this whole webinar and found out our smartphones, we could instead participate in science instead of talking about it like we are right now. So it's absolutely going on in practice. But also, I think it's very important, and I stole this beautiful mushroom from Eva Mendes from University of Madrid, who for a few years were assigned to the EU Commission as advisor on open science. Open science manifests itself in a lot of ways, not less open access, but all these tools and publications and models and openness and fair data. But Eva at least have proposed that citizen science is the bridgehead, or the tool that can harvest all these beautiful open methods. So open science actually become available and is included with citizens. Again, if we are moving a little bit further down into the trenches, and you will need to look at 3 brief slides with citizen science typologies. Citizen science can be that you have an app and report wildlife through your telephone. It's brief, it doesn't take very much, and it doesn't require very deep involvement or maybe even understanding. But citizen science can be co-created and transformative. So, for example, a beautiful project we heard at the hackathon in Geneva a few months back, where a community of welders in Africa put smartphones data into their wells to see who is using them and what is the status of it and how does it affect the community, and how can you improve water quality and sickness. That is a truly transformative project. So there are several ways of looking at citizen science, which is important as it is science. I myself come from publishing and public engagement with science, and I respect both fields tremendously, but that does not include data collection or the collective efforts of people. So building, for example, on Mookie Hagley, who has founded the Extreme Citizen Science Center at Paul Aries' University College London, there are ways where citizens can be sensors through an app. They can also interpret data, which is done on SciStarter, Suniverse, and multiple platforms. But again, you could include in health science or community-based research, for example, measurements of pollution and noise around airports, or improving water qualities in big cities, or even collaborative science. There are many different ways, but for practical reasons, you could simply chuck it up into 3 parts. Also very, very useful if you in a library are considering, how can we actually work with this in practice? It comes down to inclusion, contribution, and reciprocality, meaning a level or a layer of scientific information that needs to be curated. And it's just to say that libraries are perfectly suited, in my opinion, for all 3, but not least the scientific communication. Libraries, that should be one of the fortes, one of our strengths. So it's really about activities. Sorry, I have a window open, sorry about that. Activities the public can participate in, contribution for science and scientists, contribution for the public, dissemination of scientific information to the public, and listening to citizens' opinions and needs. It's really as simple as that if we as libraries want to make it operational. Many people endorse this. This is from Nature. The best research is produced when researchers and communities work together. Nature, again, a group of scientists and the United Nations have done a roadmap to see whether the sustainable development goals are implemented and measured. There are, again, thousands of projects available readily online. And again, the quality of data in a majority of these projects are publishable and retrievable, and in most cases, fair. So there is absolutely many good reasons to do it. Also, before I dig into what we do at SDU briefly, in Europe, also during the pandemic, several citizen science hubs have emerged. So it's an active live thing where people like myself see ourselves as professionals trying to bridge the gap between society and the public. So bridging the gap, and that is the last sort of 10 minutes of my presentation. SDU Citizen Science, our knowledge center, as facilitator between science and society. What is it that we actually do? How did we get started? And who do you work with? We had this tricky, if not wicked problem at our university, that we were placed in two centers of our city of 200,000 people. There were 3 miles between the big university hospital and health science faculty and the rest of the university. And the university management proposed a one campus structure and wanted to make sure that we both were available to the public, but also work together. So one of the things that we proposed from the library together with the with the health science faculty was whether citizen science could be a tool. So what we did was we simply made a workshop of 30 participants, which were half scientists and professionals from health science and the university faculty, but also media, museums people, citizens. And you could say we simply locked the door, put a lot of smart people in a room, nudged them or pushed them a little bit for 6 hours. And the idea was to come up with one citizen science project. Sorry. I am very sorry about that. The Danish high school students are graduating today and are roaming around the city. So I'm sorry if there's too much noise, please interrupt me.
I don't hear them, so no worries about that.
Okay. But again, the idea was, could we involve citizens, everyday ordinary citizens, like every one of us here when we are not at work and happen to be working at a university or a university library? Could we make some sort of effort for them to prioritize what is important in research rather than doctors or politicians? So in that sense, we came up with a project called A Healthier Southern Denmark. So what it is that 5 health science projects are voted by a scientific committee to be put out via a TV partner that are doing a 2-week promotional campaign. We do a lot of festivals and dialogue and social media, and we have a high school panel of up to 10 high school classes that are working together with these 5 research groups to promote the message. And in the end, may the best woman or man win. The project that is voted by citizens to be the most applicable to society gets what is 1 million Danish kroner. And the last few years, as the project has grown, there are also a second and a third prize. But besides the researchers are getting their message out and recruiting people for their projects, I think right now around 1.5, maybe 1.7 million people in our region have heard about this, and around 65,000 have actively participated by voting. So again, it's a mix between public engagement with science and citizen science, but it allowed us to actually consolidate ourselves because university management and societal partners noticed this. So we did a citizen science network for a few years with a very, very strong focus on facilitation, where we reach out to researchers, recruit them, train them, do their communication, try to frame their projects, but also connect them with media, the public, NGOs, policymakers, and in the end, want them to collect data. So again, at citizen science, at SDU, citizen science can be a lot of things, but we see it as we are really strong on the reciprocality part of it, meaning that we seriously want to promote and generate a dialogue based on research and have citizens actively participating in our research. So we consolidated that in 2021, where we opened the Citizen Science Knowledge Center. And again, maybe close to the other slide that we showed, we are a partnership between 5 faculties. We happen to be based in the library because the researchers and university management felt that we were a neutral ground. If this center or hub was based, for example, at health science or social science, chances are they would favor researchers or projects from that area. So you could say that libraries are per definition open and democratic. So we work with a staff of 10 people or so in the library, but also people from research support, communication, in a loosely based network from project to project. And we have been in 3 EU pan-European projects and 30 local projects at this time. So a few examples. We found out, or researchers wanted to know, what happened to all our smartphones and devices, because they could see that quite an astounding number were not recycled. So we did a community outreach campaign via 25 NGOs, 4 garbage stations or landfills who are collecting garbage or electronic waste, and a media partner. And we collected 17 containers of electronic waste from around 5,000 citizens that were tagged and included in a data set to say what were actually going on. And it turned out that it was really not that difficult. People just felt some sort of closeness to their device. They had their old pictures. They felt some sort of attachment to their old computers, and they had no idea that they could be recycled. So that were published in journals, and we sent recommendations via Danish politicians to Danish municipalities who are now collecting this e-waste, and Danish EU politicians are trying to pressure the European Union, at least, to make more sustainable policies. We from the library organized everything but the media campaign together with all the partners. We also have a citizen science project at our own university called SDU Moves. So our 25,000 students and 4,000 employees were feeling inactive, and motivation and stress were increasing. So we are, based on citizen science methods, in a 4-year study, including them in activities. They are allowed to do participate in walks and fitness and everything from badminton to whatnot during work hours. And then we make 4 clinical studies of them each year and compare that with the Danish National Register to see whether their health have improved and whether the motivation have improved. And very importantly, that was a very, very good way of engaging our vice rector as a spokesperson and also contributing funds for that project. We also have a biology project where we had high schools and citizens collecting water samples. Again, the library did the community building, recruited partners, made sure that water samples could be tagged and handed in, built an app, and did all the communication part. So there's very, very much practical, hands-on work with competences libraries already have. And we have also made an active living area where we invited citizens around. There are 40,000 people living around our university to discuss with us how could these 90 acres be more inclusive and could be used by schools and people who are taking walks. We also have a marine tracker project where we build in the libraries the infrastructure. And I apologize for not updating, but we had a group meeting with the biologists today. They track small mammals or wildlife in the water to see where they migrate, where they give birth, and where they can find them. And we don't have 8,000 sightings, we have 10,000 sightings because we got the last data set. And the library did a survey of the participants that found out that they participate because they care about the environment, they care about or have an interest in marine life, but the most important thing was that they wanted to do things in their local community together with their neighbors or their fellow boaters or bathers. So that was a very important insights. The last 2 minutes is that libraries can absolutely, like right now, go into citizen science. So we could recommend that you build a point of contact, which is recommended by many institutions, which simply is a hub based on, for example, the model we have at SDU. And I would ask after I'm finished that Paul Erich elaborate a little bit because he invented that model together with Tiberius Ignat. Then it's very, very important to say that this is contextual. A library in Chile or the US or in Denmark are different and should probably do it in different ways. It's important to prioritize it. It's important that libraries can build networks internally and externally. We can definitely do advocacy and also by means of citizen science, sort of smuggle the open science agenda into the university. We can utilize existing skills, fair data, and we can teach citizen science. And the good news is, this is not something I'm posturing. We did a study of pan-European libraries that we published in April. Paul and Tiberius Ignat did their study and recommendations a few years back. So libraries are leaning on really strong foundation here. So you should ask yourself, is this relevant in our library or in our unit? But you could start by simply mapping what kind of activities do you have. Look at what kind of skills do you already have. And I can say that European research libraries have reported 80% of them that they not only know citizen science, but they also have 8 of the 12 core skills. They also report existing services. They also feel that by advocating citizen science, they make their voice stronger heard by researchers that may not know them that well. You could start by simply exploring by doing workshops. So there are a lot of ways to actually go about it. And one of the collaborators at SDU, and I always end my presentations with this quote, Professor Josep Porello, University of Barcelona, one of the first people to go into citizen science many years ago. He runs the Open Systems unit at University of Barcelona. And Josep sort of hacked a library session we had at a symposium a few years back. And he looked every librarian there in the eye and he said, you know, if libraries can loan out books, why can you not loan out a citizen science project? And it's just to say that we, and I agree 100% with that, libraries can play a crucial role as bridge builders by hosting and doing services, by being this hub of citizen science. And I'm not the only person who feel that. There are quite a lot of research, quite a lot of things to dig in. And with that, I think my 33 minutes is up. Thank you right now for listening, and I will stop sharing and be happy to first, if I may, Paul, I suppose you are present still. I think the broad, the bespoke model that we also from SDU Library have adopted, you and Tiberius made that, and I know at UCL Library Services, you are also having a citizen science service. Could I maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit on my presentation before we field questions?
Yes, Thomas, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Walter for the opportunity to join you in real time in this really fascinating discussion about citizen science. So here in Europe, led by the insights and the enthusiasm of people like Thomas here, and Tiberius Ignat from Scientific Knowledge Services, which is based in Munich. We have in LIBER managed to take a very strong line on citizen science. We started a citizen science working group, and I was honored to be asked to chair it, to get it established. I chaired the first term, and now Thomas and Tiberius have taken over as joint chairs. And I'm back on the back row trying to help with work as we work through a very ambitious agenda, which is to make citizen science a pivotal part of the operation of every research library, which is a member of Europe, a member of LIBER. So that's 500 research libraries in Europe. There are a number of models, and Thomas has done a really good job in explaining the different approaches that libraries can take. He's asked me to talk particularly about the bespoke model, and I put a link in the chat to a bespoke video, which gives a bit more detail about what it is that we are talking about. But basically, a bespoke is a single point of contact in a university, or in a region, or in a faculty within the university, which acts as the focal point for activity in citizen science or discussions about citizen science. Now, here in UCL, we have an open science office. I'm head of the open science office, amongst other things. But we don't have a bespoke for our citizen science activity, because there is so much citizen science activity going on in academic departments that we don't need a single point of contact. There are many points of contact in UCL. So the role the library plays here is as a coordinator, not a single point of contact, but as a coordinator and advisor for all the citizen science activity that's going on elsewhere in the university. And this is important to us because in our national research evaluation framework, engagement with society counts for 25% of the marks that a university gets. And the higher the mark a university gets, the more money they get from government, Research Council funding. It's Research England funding. So having that advisory role, that coordinating role, is very important. If you're starting from scratch, if you're in a university which has no palpable citizen science presence, and in parts of Europe, citizen science is very new to research libraries, then it is realistic to think that the library could take on this bespoke role, this single point of contact, and act as a leader on behalf of the whole university in developing citizen science activities. Here in LIBER, in the Citizen Science Working Group, we try and do both things because we have 500 members across Europe, as Thomas has said, not one size fits all. So for some, it's a bespoke model where they would act as a single point of contact. For others, it's more like a UCL role, which is an advisory role, a coordinating role, but a role which is very important in feeding into the university. Thomas, I hope that's helpful. I look forward to hearing your answers to some of the questions which colleagues have posed in the chat.
It's just very briefly, and it's a perfect example that there's no one size fits all. But again, you have dedicated staff that works with citizen science, and I think that is the important message, that it's different than our model, and it should be because our universities are different. And I mean, citizen science pretty much in Europe originated at UCL, I don't know, 20 years ago or something, while others, we are fairly new and have maybe only been into it a few years. But Wouter, Lynn, I took the liberty to invite Paul to say something because he is really the capacity here. And I think both of us are more than happy to answer questions, Paul, I believe, if possible.
That's up to Wouter. I will see what Wouter tells me.
Yeah, great to see you, Paul, and great to have you here, and to hear about this fascinating experience at UCL in London. I have a question about citizen science in general, or science in general. Should all science become citizen science? I mean, is this a paradigm shift, a complete paradigm shift that is going to change science, research, everything? Or is this just a different modality? Is this just a different way of doing things that may apply in some cases, to some cases, and not to other cases?
I think I can start the answer, Paul, and maybe you can finish it.
I'll do my best.
I sincerely hope not that citizen science is the only model. I think you could see it as a supplement or a new set of research methods, plural, that can supplement other projects. So we absolutely need the philosopher who is thinking about a problem for 30 years and comes up with a unique proposition because that can change the world. And you absolutely need the physicist going into the lab. But it's just to say that quite a lot of problems that are solved at university may not, or may only be marginally relevant to society. And again, I think it was even before the pandemic that there were published so much scientific information that it was impossible for no human to actually consume it. And even within specialized research fields, there are published so much information or research that nobody can actually follow it. Is that applicable to society? Does that help also maybe the taxpayers that, at least in Europe, are heavily funding us? So I think maybe, Paul, that was the first part of the answer. I sincerely hope not. But I think citizen science really can solve problems that maybe traditional science in some ways cannot.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. I'd say a couple of things to elaborate on the point that you've made. I'm reminded of Charles Darwin, the 19th century scientist who wrote, excuse me, The Origin of Species, which changed our view of the role of humans in the world, where we came from and why we exist. He wasn't employed by a university. He was a citizen working on his own. Admittedly, he was a rich man. He had a private income, so he didn't need to work for a university, but he would technically be called a citizen scientist. And looking forward to the current century, 21st century, what are the most pressing problems that face us in the world today? Climate change, global warming, poverty across the world. These concern society, because society is impacted by all these developments. It seems to me perfectly sensible that if you take the Darwinian view of the scientist as a citizen scientist and look to the challenges that face us today, that citizen science should be a really valid way of approaching the challenges that society faces. Society can help define what the challenges are and help solve them by working alongside scientists, and if you follow the extreme citizen science model that Muki Hackley here in UCL has developed, they're actually doing science. They're not sitting alongside the researchers. They're doing the science. They're leading science. It was that top layer in the 4 layers of citizen science activity that Muki laid out in the slide that Thomas showed. So it isn't a new way of doing things. In fact, it's an old way of doing things put to new uses.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Thomas and Paul. Lynn, next question, please.
Yes, first I just want to share a comment from Beatrice Espinosa. Thanks for the interesting talk. It allows to participate in social inclusion. For my part, I'm working on the social inclusion of waste pickers in the city of Puebla, and I would like to deepen the ideas and project that you have shared with me today. And then Nadia Olivares have a question. How can we start citizen science initiatives in our communities? Do you have some good advice?
I can start maybe. I am presuming that you represent a university or a university library, so that would be my starting point. I think it's very important to gauge, are there any pressing local problems that need to be addressed? So again, in one of the campus cities of our university, pollution from traffic or burning fuels is a problem. So in one of our cities, we have a PhD student monitoring how can we get people to bike more. But that started out as a collaborative town hall effort. Which problems are you interested in solving? That could be one thing. But another thing is that we from time to time gather researchers at our own university, present to them citizen science, ask them to present their projects, and simply workshop or share ideas, also sometimes with citizens present. Does this make any sense to do in our local community? And my bet will be that perhaps as at SDU, quite a few researchers are already working with the community, but are maybe using them more as respondents or passive activists. People are activating more passively than doing it more actively, and are actually sort of also testing, is this relevant to you? Maybe discuss the data and the findings. But sometimes it's very, very simple steps. It could be do a town hall with researchers, and the risk there is that the citizen wants something that the university cannot offer. But the other way is to work with local NGOs. We have done that quite a lot. We have worked with around 50 NGOs in Denmark who represent people. It could be pollution, it could be the mentally ill, it could be handicapped, it could be elderly people, whatnot. And some of them always have something that their members are concerned with or of, also with Alzheimer's. So that could also be a place maybe to start. Paul, I don't know if you can supplement.
Well, I think you've given so many great examples, there's very little I can add, but perhaps I can just give one example of the way my library here in UCL first got involved in citizen science. And it's a very library-oriented project, but has really paid dividends. We hold in the library here the writings, letters and papers of Jeremy Benford, the 19th century utilitarian philosopher. They're all digitized. We got money from a Mellon grant to have them digitized. And then they need transcribing and publishing. And we publish them now through UCL Press, our open access university press here in UCL. But for the transcription, there are a number of ways of doing it. You can either employ editors who will do the editing themselves, or you can do what we did, which is to crowdsource the transcription to the general public. and invite them to look at the digitized scans of the Benford papers, to transcribe them, and then to send those transcriptions through to the editorial team for inclusion in the printed and digital volumes that UCL Press is producing. And that's really paid dividends, because we have a body of transcribers who really want to get involved in scholarship, work with scholars, work on original sources. And so that was the library's baptism into citizen science, and crowdsourcing is certainly something we do again as we work on other parts of our collections.
And I think an important emphasis is that citizen science, again, is contextual, but it's not only reserved to water and birds, where it maybe traditionally comes from. It's within the humanistic, social science, all medical sciences on the rise. So it's just to say that there is something out there, no matter the profile of your university or your library. There are several technical universities that are opening Beachbox or citizen science hubs. So again, citizen science is contextual, but chances are it's relevant to most, if not all, disciplines.
Yeah.
And we have another questions about data. How do you ensure the quality of data in citizen science project? Are there any specific challenge in terms of data?
Yes, there are. And the first one is that most librarians that are working with research data management believe that data from citizen science projects are of a lesser quality than from traditional science, which is actually not true. Of course, there are good examples and bad examples, but again, citizen science must comply to strict data standards like every other project. So you should be able to make a protocol, be sure that you make a method description. If you're within the humanistic department and are collecting, for example, we are collecting interviews from elderly citizens through a audiovisual database where people can upload them. They need to comply to certain standards that are devised by researchers, discussed and implemented with the people who are doing it. Also, we're doing quite a lot of work with high schools. And two of the sessions we have in this is actually, what is data quality? What is the method? How do we collect it? But that has also the implication that if you do that, you train the citizen into what is data, what is science. It does not come from someone posturing something or someone feeling a certain way. So it's just to say data quality in citizen science projects are of the same or higher quality. They should follow protocols or methods, but it's a big discussion because there's a lot of confusions and misunderstandings about that from people who are not participating in citizen science. I don't know if I answered the question fully.
No, thank you. And then talking about the participants, what motivates them to participate, and how do you recruit them and find them?
I think Paul's example from UCL is brilliant, because it's people who feel they want to work with researchers, feel strongly about cultural heritage, and want to be included. We have a similar project, way smaller, but it's there. I think it's one of the actual crucial points in citizen science. What motivates people to participate? Or if you are a younger person than me, it's somewhat said, what's in it for me, right? But you should be able to answer the question that a citizen comes up to you if you're doing citizen digital humanities or collecting water samples. What's in it for me? Why am I doing it? And that is, I mean, communication and motivation within citizen science is a whole field in itself, because it's so important. And I even believe that citizen science theory and practice have done a special edition or issue on this. But it is really important that when you devise, or we devise as library professionals, discuss projects with researchers, it's an extreme crucial point, because if we cannot answer that, then we are only using people to ensure that we get data, and we are not taking seriously the proposition in the Mookie-Hackley level 2, 3, 4, can we make it participatory science? It's not to say that crowdsourcing, getting people in to do things in apps is not important, but it is a question that you should be able to answer. And again, in our marine tracker, it turned out that we thought it was people, ordinary people who felt very strongly for the environment. That was one of the reasons, but there were 2 other reasons that we were not aware of. So in the second year, we redesigned the project and the communication and onboarded more people to actually participate. So it is something that should be investigated. The way we normally do it is we very, very early on collect a group of citizens to discuss the actual project outline and the research design. Is it relevant? Does it solve a problem? How much time are you willing to invest? Would you bring a friend? Or so we monitor and evaluate all our projects on that note. But the last thing I heard from a Danish, very, very renowned citizen science practitioner called Kaarsted, a professor, he hires external partners to measure motivation, whether the citizens are happy in his projects. It's just to say it's that important. And of course, it can be several ways. There are some beautiful movies made out by the American Citizen Science Association, where you follow an inner city group in the US that has horrendously bad water quality. People might actually be dying from it. And they interview and discuss this with the people who are participating and running the project, just as Paul has said, is the extreme citizen science. So there are many, many good examples of where you can't even talk of motivation. You can really talk about maybe even survival or at least health hazards in some cases.
All right, thank you so much, Thomas. A question about the role of libraries in citizen science. How familiar are libraries with citizen science? I mean, you've been giving some great examples of your library, and Paul also has his library is very active in this. But are those exceptions, or is it something that you see that all over Europe or on other continents, you see that is becoming something that libraries are really actively engaging in?
Actually, I would like to answer that question, but Paul, you as founder of our group may actually be more qualified to answer that. So if you could start, I can supplement.
Well, I'm sure you can do more than supplement, but thank you for the flattering words. So I will start. I think it's true to say that 5 years ago, this library here in London, in UCL, was not engaged in citizen science. We're very strong supporters of the open science movement. We started what is one of the most successful open access university presses in any university anywhere in the world. We have research data repositories. We train our newly appointed staff in citizen science, in open science principles. And we've embedded open science in our promotion and evaluation criteria for academic colleagues. But citizen science wasn't a prominent part of the role of the library. That's changed in the last 5 years, I'm glad to say, and we're able to do the types of things I've been talking about. Why has it changed? Well, it changed because I wanted it to change, because I think it's an aspect of leadership, of senior management leadership in the library, that you broaden the mission and the ambition of your library to meet the needs that the university has of the library service. Libraries are more than storing books and issuing books and stamping books. That's why I introduced publishing into the library through UCL Press. That's why we've introduced research data management into the Open Science Office. And that's why I've introduced citizen science into the Open Science Office as well, because I think it's a new role for the library to take on alongside existing roles. In some parts of Europe, the idea of citizen science is well established. Thomas's University in South Denmark is an absolutely fantastic example. University of Barcelona, the University of Zurich, these are fantastic examples. But I have to say, if you looked at most LIBER library members, you wouldn't find a great deal of citizen science activity in all of them, because it's a new agenda. And that's one of the reasons, Thomas, I'm so pleased to see Thomas speaking here today to raise awareness about the potential that citizen science has for libraries and to encourage libraries in Latin America and the Caribbean to embrace the concept and start developing practices and projects in this area. So, Thomas, what would you like to say to add to that?
I have only a brief supplement in this. We did some study of that because we had 125 LIBER libraries answering a survey and an interview guide. And it's exactly as Paul says, around a quarter of LIBER libraries are doing citizen science or experimenting with citizen science. And that's actually quite a few numbers. If we posture that this is applicable to all, then it's actually quite a few libraries that are in some ways engaged. Of course, it's only a fourth, but what's really, really interesting is that 85% of all library directors think it's extremely important and can see the point. And not only that, they already feel they have the competences in-house from staff that can actually do it. So I think Paul and I and our colleagues in the working group have begun discussing, how come it is like that? There's something lost in translation somewhere. But it's just to say that apparently a fourth of the European research libraries are doing citizen science one way or the other, very deep and as a core mission, or maybe experimenting or are part of projects. But apparently almost all of them feel a need to participate. So again, I think, Paul, if this was our only job doing advocacy for this, I don't think we will be out of business the first few years.
No, I think we'd have a job for life, actually. But anyway, I think we have other things to do as well, unfortunately. I should just add, because Thomas hasn't mentioned it, that what the LIBER working group is doing is producing a guide for research libraries on how to get involved in citizen science. We've just published second section on the LIBER website about citizen science infrastructures. But the aim is to have a complete guide of 4 sections initially, covering the whole area of citizen science activity, what research libraries can do, what they need to do in order to make themselves suitable vehicles for developing citizen science activity. I would recommend that to listeners on the call if they want some follow-up information about what the role of a library in a citizen science landscape could look like.
And it's in the link to the working group that I posted a few months back. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul and Thomas. So, I mean, citizen science can give a boost to research libraries. And how can citizen science give a boost to citizens? How in a way, pays it back? Community members who participate in citizen science project?
Well, perhaps I could start with what I think is a really cracking example from, I admit, my own university here in UCL. So we have an open science office, and citizen science is part of that activity in the office. And academics here in UCL work with the local community, with the London boroughs. So we are in the London borough of Camden, and we offer citizen science activities to school children in the borough, and we train them how to be citizen scientists. We make them aware of what skills they need to develop. Then we put them on citizen science projects, and they report back on the citizen science project. And if they're successful, my office, this is the Open Science Office, awards them skills certificates. And I presented our first batch of 20 skills certificates about 2 months ago to our first batch of graduates from the citizen science activity that we've been undertaking in Camden. Now, they will use those certificates to develop more citizen science awareness, but also in their job applications when they're applying to university or when they're applying for another job. They'll use the skills qualification that the library through the Open Science Office has given them to further their careers, to show how much they have to offer to any employer. So catching people at that very young age, 16 to 18, really is a way of embedding citizen science knowledge and an awareness of the importance of citizen science into the community. And the library can take a pivotal role in supporting that and rewarding it.
And I can only supplement that we do, if not in the same way, we have currently 3 high school projects. And I absolutely agree with everything you said. We try to build it into the curriculum, and we have the first batch of people who had citizen science components at the high school exam a few weeks back.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And over to Lynn for a last question, and then we will close.
So we received a question from Beatrice Espinosa. In your experience, I would like to know your advice to interest young people in science and its application.
That is a great question. I will say that the way we do it, we do it in 2 ways. We have projects that are running what is going on in the spare time of people outside of school activities. Typically young kids with a heavy family component, things to do together with families within science, because that builds bonds between the kids and their parents and grandparents even. So that has to be fun, engaging, and can make them to do quality time. I think the ant hunt.dk was the most popular project like that a few years. They found 25 new species, by the way. The other way is through the school system, because there are scientific proof that if you engage kids the exact age group Paul is mentioning in science through the curriculum, they feel it's more fun, it's more engaging, they get higher grades, and they feel it's much more fun going to school. But they don't know that until they try it. So the people to get to there are the teachers, high school teachers.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Over to you, Wouter.
Well, I'm aware that we could talk about this fascinating subject for another hour, also because we have many more questions, which we will share with you, Thomas and Paul, so that you can also have a look at those questions and come back to the people who came up with those questions. And well, thank you so much, both Thomas and Paul, for your time, for sharing your experience about citizen science, which is still a very new topic for many of us. And so it's so fascinating. I mean, we had a first webinar about this last month, and now the second one. And so it's really, I'm very grateful that we can learn from your experiences, that we can hear the successes you have, but also the things that are a bit you're struggling with, because this is a new thing. This is something that you're setting up in your institutions, and there may be resistance because this is a big change, of course. But this is really a fascinating topic, and thank you so much for sharing with us. We'll be in touch. Thank you also for sharing all the references to some interesting literature that we'll have a look at. And yeah, we'll be in touch then for our next webinar next month, as every month. And thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Have a great morning. Have a great evening, depending on where you are. And take care.